All right, we're live. Welcome to the Highly Conscious Man podcast. I have with me today a special guest, John Ray. I like to think of you as another one of the most interesting men in the world.
Oh, thank you. I like that introduction. I hope I can live up to it. I will.
Absolutely. So how did you start the brand Who is John Ray, and what inspired that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll answer it because it's such a good question. When I was in my 20s, I really wanted to be famous, and so I started it for all the wrong reasons. I was like, everybody needs to know my name, and like this thing called the internet is going to be a big deal, and this was like right when people were starting to blog around like 2004. And so I started writing articles just about like all the partying that I was doing and all the weird, awkward experiences that I was having. And I found it to be such a cathartic experience. Like I wasn't into any metaphysical or personal growth. I was all about like, how do I party and hook up as much as possible? And this blog was like an expression for me, like an artistic expression of, you know, this is how I'm living my life. How are you guys doing it? And what was interesting is through that process, I realized that by writing in that blog, I was inadvertently learning about who John Ray was. That wasn't even the, I think I got whoisjohnray.com because johnray.com wasn't available. You know, and I was like, I guess this is the brand. And so because it was so early in blogging, I was connecting with like all of these kind of heavy hitters that you hear about now that have huge million followings. And I had a pretty big following. And then I went through this kind of weird experience where all of a sudden I started feeling guilty and ashamed of a lot of that because I was having a more expanded awareness. And so I was like, oh shit, I've been living like a dirty human being. And, you know, I just haven't been conscious in the way that I'm moving forward. And so I stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs, and tried to figure out like, how do I reset my life and have as much fun as I was doing when I was, you know, partying every single night. And it took a long time. And I took the blog down because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know who I was anymore. And I really went on this like deep dive journey where I started reading all the spiritual books and all the self-help books and trying to figure out, can you create your reality? Can you do any of this stuff that these books say? Or are these just a bunch of ghosts that are writing stuff to us? And really started to learn how to work with some of those metaphysical principles. And then ultimately, I felt confident that I had found my actual authentic voice, not like the party guy voice that I had used in my 20s. But in my 30s, I realized, oh, like I want to help people. That's what I want to do. Like even when I was partying, I wanted to help people have fun. I hated seeing anybody down in the dumps. Like I wanted to lift people up. And I was just using the wrong mechanism back in my 20s. But in my 30s, I found all of these amazing personal coaches, personal growth coaches and spiritual entities and aliens and all of these people who had this super uplifting message. And I said, yeah, I want to be a part of that. And so that's kind of has been the evolution of who is John Ray. And it's also a question that I think everybody should ask, like, who am I? That question opens so many doors because it assumes that you don't know, which means that you can learn something new about yourself.
Yeah, I'm connecting with more and more people who are going through, you could say, an awakening process, and maybe their entire career is transitioning, or you know, they're going through a divorce and they're losing everything, and it's a complete reset. But it's opening them up. It's opening their heart up to like this new beginning, really, and journey to discovering who they really are. And
there's no mistakes. There, you know, paradigm crashes happen for a reason. I think we talked about it on the last, when you were on my podcast, how in chaos theory, sand in an hourglass is falling into a mound, and then eventually that mound that looks so perfect collapses into itself, and it looks like all hell is broken loose. But actually, it's forming a stronger, bigger base so that the mound can get bigger. And that's what all paradigm crashes are, is just like an opportunity or a catalyst for us to have a stronger base and move forward holding more space.
Cool. So I wanted to dive in with you on these 7 pillars of the highly conscious man. I definitely consider you a fellow woke man.
Oh, I'm woke, man.
Like JP Sears, like JP, Jack Peterson, and
yeah, there's a lot of JPs that are getting woke right now.
yeah.
Jordan Peterson.
Oh yeah, there it is.
We got JPs all over the
Love
place.
it. These are my homeboys.
If you got JP initials, you better get woke right now.
Yeah, or woke will wake you.
Yeah.
So I put together this system after, I have a similar story, going through an awakening process and diving into all of the self-development books and hiring mentors. And I would say I was really seeking happiness and, self-confidence, but it turned into a much deeper journey than I ever expected. Very similar to you. And anyways, I wanted to kind of like be able to make sense of this awakening process. And I came across the chakra system, which are basically the energy centers in the body, based on ancient Buddhism and Hinduism. Wouldn't say I'm an expert on this, but it helped me make sense of self-actualization. And so I put together a 7-step system here, and I'd love to
Let's hear it.
talk about it with you.
Yeah.
And hear your comments on it as well. So the steps are, one is the root chakra, and I define this as taking full responsibility for our nervous system. So the root chakra is basically connected to the nervous system, and it's where we experience, the fight, flight, freeze response.
Yeah.
I'd say a huge part of my journey has been getting a handle over how I deal with fear and my flight, fight, freeze responses.
Yeah.
And that has been really helpful on my journey.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, for me, the chakras are metaphors. Everything is a metaphor to talk about something that can't be talked about, and so I think the chakras are an interesting thing to point to, that kind of represent these shifts that we can go through and the way that energy can cycle through our body. And whether you call them chakras or the central nervous system or the centers of human design or the 7 seals, there's a million different names that you can give this. But what we're talking about is like, what are the levels of experience that somebody can go through? And I think the first level that we go through on planet Earth, and you talked about, the root chakra is like our nervous system, us tuning into our nervous system. Well, really what it's about is like what makes you nervous, because the root chakra system is all about like survival. If you're fearful that you don't have enough money and that you're not going to provide for your family and that, everybody's out to get you, then you got some serious root chakra issues. And so really what it represents is what the structured energy looks like, and whether you're in coherence with survival or out of coherence with survival. And if you're out of coherence with survival, you're living your life and you're real nervous, you're real paranoid. But if you've got survival locked down, you're confident, you're like a tree, nobody can knock you over, you got ideas coming a million miles a minute, and you're ready to build and make stuff happen because you have a strong foundation.
Yeah. I would say you're coming from a place of creativity rather than survival and scarcity.
Yeah, and you're grounding your ideas. The root chakra is all about grounding to earth. Like, what is that metaphor? Bringing my energy to earth. It's saying, don't live in your head so much. Don't just be a dreamer, because if you're just a dreamer, you're only operating in the mental dimension. And so you need to learn how to ground your ideas into reality so that they can become something touchable, tangible, that you can actually interact with in this physical world. Because let's face it, nothing's real. So if you want to live in the mental dimension, you certainly can do that. But the reason, or the sense that I get, is the reason that we're here in this physical dimension is to learn how to do things in the physical dimension. If we only wanted to do things in the mental dimension, we wouldn't have come into this one. And so learning how to take your dreams from that mental dimension and root them into reality so that you can actually have a tangible experience with it, to me, that's what the root chakra represents.
And I think a lot of it is, well, a lot, if not all of it, has to do with taking action as well.
Yeah.
Which requires discipline. And I also put down boundaries, like being able to set healthy boundaries for ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's all about building your castle. You know, you got to have a strong foundation. You got to know where the walls should be. You got to know where your water system's coming in and out. Where's all of the waste, the human waste from your castle? How's that going to escape? And is that going to escape back out into the greater reality in a way that's actually healthy? You know, do you need protection? And if you need protection, how much? You know, based on how fearful you are, those walls are going to have to get higher and higher. You know, and it's interesting. Reality is a total mirror to what we're collectively going through. So it's so interesting that there's so much talk about, let's build the wall 30 feet taller, because that's what people are doing at an energetic level. They're so fearful that instead of working through their fears, they're like, let me build as many protective barriers around myself as I can. And that's one of the reasons that I try to challenge people in the metaphysical community, because I think they get stuck in navel gazing. They get stuck in these communities that are super insular and insulate them from the real world, and they don't ever actually interact with the mirror of reality. If you're actually interacting with reality, you should have no fear to walk into any room, any demographic, and just be who you are, because reality is always going to show you what needs to be cleared in your energy system. So there's really no reason to be fearful, because the sooner you walk into that room that you're afraid to walk into, the sooner you can clear that energetic blockage so that you won't be fearful the next time.
I love your perspective with that. I think people are afraid, and I think it's just part of human nature, of stepping into a room. I also heard, I'm pretty sure the top three fears, two of the top three fears are public speaking and social anxiety, probably something like that.
Yeah.
And so, everyone's dealing with that to some degree.
Right. Well, because when we're a kid, your parent says, shut up, don't talk to strangers, mind your own business. Like, these are all things that we get told as a kid because our parents want to control us so that they don't have to deal with their uncomfortable emotions. And so then our entire life stems from this false premise that we're not supposed to be talking to people that are outside of our peer group or our family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is big. So how can people? Because I think these is some of the biggest fears that we face on a daily basis. How can people, instead of shying away from their fear of for example, walking into a room of people they don't know, to going into that atmosphere intentionally, and talk about kind of the process of allowing your emotions to come up and allowing reality to burn through your emotional wounds and fears and things like that.
So what happens through the law of, there's a misconcept here that I want to correct for the record right now. The law of attraction is not some way for you to get a fancy car. It can result in that, but the true purpose of the law of attraction is to show you where your samskaras, which are energy blockages in your nervous system, to show you where those are. So the law of attraction is always going to tell you where your energy isn't transparent. And so if we take that premise, then you wouldn't be afraid to look in the mirror unless you've been smoking a bunch of crack and your teeth are all black and nasty looking and gnarly looking, or you got in a fight and you got a black eye. Like, most people don't mind looking in the mirror. I love looking in the mirror at myself. And once you learn that reality is just a giant energetic mirror, just reframing it in that way can give you an excuse to step into scenarios that maybe you otherwise wouldn't, because it is impossible for you to get something that isn't a mirror of your energy system. And so what happens is when we walk out into the world, most people will try to justify why they're doing things. So that's happening from a mental dimension. I'm pointing to my mind right now because most of our fears and most of our justifications and most of the reasoning behind we do things or why we do things happen from that mental dimension. And what I'm always trying to talk to people about doing is get it out of the mental dimension and pull it into your body. When you think about walking into that room, think about the worst case scenario, what could go wrong, and feel how uncomfortable that is in your body. All of this stuff that's like, hey, you got to write an affirmation that you're going to have a shiny car and you're going to have the hottest girlfriend in the world. Like, those are all good things unless you don't believe them, and then you're actually building more resistance to those things. So I always tell people, before you write an affirmation of what you want, write all the things that you don't want, that all of the worst case scenarios, the things you're actually afraid are going to happen, because those are the things that are preventing you from seeing your desires in the mirror of reality. It's like when you look in an actual mirror, if you've got blemishes on your face and you're like, man, I wish I didn't have all these blemishes on my face, you wouldn't try to put your thumb on the mirror and smudge out the blemish there. You would say, okay, well, do I need to eat something differently? Am I taking in too much sugar? Is there some sort of a topical ointment that I can use? Like, you would move towards yourself and know that you need to create the solution at the self level, not at the mirror level. And too many people are looking out into the mirror and they're trying to fix the mirror. And what we need to do is fix ourselves so that the mirror will reflect back to us a better version of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Always a good reminder. So if someone's intimidated by someone else, that could be their reflection, maybe, of a higher potential.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would write down, okay, I'm intimidated of a strong man. Let's say there's like an authority figure that you don't want to talk to, and so you write down on the top of a paper, I'm afraid of a strong man. When are all the other times I've been afraid of a strong man? And you just list every time that you've been afraid of a strong man until you can't list anymore. And you try to go back as early into your childhood as possible. And 9 times out of 10, what will happen is you'll run up, oh, my grandfather was a dick. My dad was a dick. You know, so there was a strong man in your childhood that made you want to either people please or completely back away from scenarios like that. And so it's important to recognize, when are all the times that I've been afraid of a strong man? Because that's what you're afraid of. If you thought that guy was going to be nice to you, you'd just walk into the room and shake his hand. But you think that there's something based on something that's happened in your past, or based on something that you've seen that happened to somebody else, you're assuming that scenario is going to go wrong. So you write out all the times that you've had a problem with a strong man, you write out what the worst case scenario would be, and you really try to say, where do I feel this in my body? All of these things that I just listed and wrote down, where do I feel this in my body? And then you just sit in a meditative space and you focus on everything that you just wrote until you don't feel an uncomfortable feeling in your body anymore. You literally let the energy burn itself out, and once it's burned itself out, then you write the affirmations. Then you say, wouldn't it be nice if this guy was actually really nice to me? Wouldn't it be nice if he gave me the deal I wanted? Wouldn't it be nice if I gave a presentation in front of this guy and he applauded it? You know, by using wouldn't it be nice, which is an Abraham Hicks technique, that's like a Trojan horse to get past your resistance. Because you're not saying, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to crush this presentation. Because if you've never given a great presentation, you probably don't believe that's possible. But you can absolutely believe, yeah, it would be nice if I gave a great presentation. And so that's a way to lower your resistance. But you've got to do that emotional work first, where you say, what is the fear here? What am I actually afraid of? Oh, I'm afraid of strong men. When are all the other times I've been afraid of strong men? Let me list them out. Let me feel that in my body. Let me burn that energy out. And then let me talk about what I want now that I've burned it out of my energy. Because once it's not in my energy, once I express it onto paper and get it out of my body, reality doesn't have to keep reflecting it back to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next step is know what you want. So it's kind of a nice transition. You're already kind of going there. Mm-hmm. So once you kind of burn out the samskara, then you have more space to get to ask yourself what you want. And then take
and more
action
clarity. Man, everybody's thoughts are so cloudy There's so much garbage that are patterned over what we think are our thoughts. Most of these thoughts aren't even ours. They're thoughts that are coming from somebody else. They've been implanted. And so when you burn out your fear, you start being like, what the hell? This is actually the way my thoughts really are. I actually have pretty vivid ideas when all the fear's out of the way. And so it's this natural progression into, good, I've identified what I don't want. What is it that I do want? And now you can start listing all of the things that you do want because you've identified what you don't. This is all, a lot of my training early on when I was transitioning out of drugs and alcohol, and even when I was using it a little bit, came from the Abraham Hicks work. So like law of attraction, here's how you shift your mindset in order to get what you want. And a big practice that they teach is, you know what you don't want. That means you know what you do want. You take a sheet of paper, you draw a line down the middle. On one side, you say, what are all the things that I don't want? What are all the things that suck in my life right now? Good. Now I can see them on paper. What's the opposite of that? Oh, the opposite of not having any money is financial freedom. Cool. Now I know that that's what I want. So it's a really interesting way to be able to figure out what you want. Because I get people that come to me all the time and they're like, well, I don't know what I want. I'm trying to find my purpose. No, you're not. If you're still thinking that you're trying to find your purpose, what you're really trying to figure out is, how do I survive? Because once you're surviving, your purpose will just naturally come to you, because you'll be in a place of clarity where the next natural step is just obvious to you. And it's not going to be one purpose. It's going to be, oh, reality is just hooking me up over and over and over again. And I'm just showing up to where the work is. And it's a really interesting way to live, because it's in the moment. You're trusting that reality is going to cradle you and give you what you need. If something shows up and isn't to your liking, you know that there's fear in you that needs to be burned out, or some emotional trauma that needs to be burned out. And then once you burn that out, that every single negative situation has enough energy in it to just blast you off into like blissful desire space. But you have to know how to work with those situations where you let it burn the energy out. And then it's like putting a rubber band on your finger, and you pull it back and you pull it back. And that doing that energy work and that emotional work to burn it out, there's all that tension on the rubber band, and you keep pulling it back and you keep pulling it back. But the more tension on the rubber band, the further that rubber band's going to fly when you let it go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's uncomfortable, right? I mean, burning out the samskara, like, you got to... It's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies. Yeah,
I'm doing HIIT workouts right now, which is like high intensity cardio training and muscle training. It sucks. I hate them. I'm at complete muscle fatigue after every single workout, and these are only 20-minute workouts, but it works me at such a level that I'm completely fatigued after it. I can barely even stand up sometimes. And so it's super uncomfortable, but I get stronger really quick. And the next week I'm like, holy crap, I can do 30 minutes now. Like, my body feels so good. And because my body feels good, that means my mind is operating at a faster level. And so we can't be afraid of things that are uncomfortable. Like, that's one of the false premises in the law of attraction work, is that people say, oh, I can't go near anything that's uncomfortable. The only reason that it's uncomfortable is because you haven't successfully learned how to navigate resistance. Because if you knew how to navigate resistance, you would be running towards it, because you would know that that's the catapult that's going to get you over all your obstacles.
You were speaking my mind, because I was just thinking resistance as well. So yeah, when resistance comes up, sometimes in my experience, my mind can like play a trick and make some excuse of why, to keep me unaware of the resistance. But when I get clear on like, oh, like I'm resisting this, then I can like move through it. Do you have any tips on like how to handle resistance when it comes up?
Anytime thoughts come in your head that are contrary to what your intention is, think of that as an external demon that is literally floating in the ethers in another dimension that's trying to seed you with thoughts, because they're afraid. They have their hooks into you. They have similar emotional distress, and they want to share that with as many people as possible so that they don't feel like a loser for being the only one who has it. So they want to keep you down in this space. So whether that's actually happening, and maybe it is, or whether you just use that as a metaphor, every time you have an intention and then you have all these contrary thoughts coming in, think about that as ugly, gnarly demons that are trying to brainwash you into thinking, getting you to do and think something that you don't want to think, and then take out your journal or a notepad and write that demon the angriest fucking letter that you've ever written. Say, get out of my body. You don't belong here. I'm going to do this the way that I want to do it. And what you're doing is you're giving yourself an emotional release. You're allowing some of the energy that they're hooking into to leave your body so that they're not a vibrational match to you anymore. So if you can use that metaphor that there are these demonic entities that are trying to program your mind, all of a sudden we all let ourselves off the hook because we go, oh yeah, that's true. I do kind of feel tired right now. No, you don't. Because if you were actually in your alignment, you would never need to sleep. You'd be jacked up all the time and always wanting to run towards the next thing. And the next thing would be obvious to you. If you don't know what the next thing is, it's because you've got all of these demons, metaphoric or otherwise, that are blocking your vision. You need to write an angry letter to them and get them out of your space so that you can open up your vision to what you want to do, because that's what free will is. It's choosing what you want to do and literally creating your reality through your choices, and not letting all of this external noise convince you that something that you don't want is the only thing that you can get.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Now, the third pillar is listen to your feelings. So I feel like that can only happen when we have awareness of our feelings.
Yeah, and most people don't.
Right.
I didn't for years. Even when I got into the metaphysical space, I was doing all kinds of energy work and had a complete disconnect that my energy was my emotions. And I got to a place where I was so vividly living in the mental dimension, using law of attraction and using it effectively too. You can become a master of law of attraction and only use it in the mental plane, but you're using it like a voodoo artist uses it. You're manipulating people at an energetic level. And it's important to remember that, because until you bring it into your body, you're not going to actually know the ramifications of the energy work that you're doing. And so I got to the point where I could get into a situation and this visualization would come to me, and I'd see all of these feelings in little balloons or bubbles below me, and I knew at any point in time I could fall into one of those bubbles and just have like an incredibly emotional and energetic situation. But I thought that was beneath me. I thought being a master was, oh, I don't have to feel any of that. Well, what I was doing by not falling into those emotions and actually experiencing them is I was just shoving them down deeper and deeper. And so it was like shaking a bottle of Coke up, where eventually that was just going to burst open. And that did happen. And that's why I would relapse back into drugs and alcohol, because I couldn't deal with all of the feelings that I was repressing, because they were coming up so strong. And the only thing that had ever worked for me was drinking and drugs. So I would go back to that. And it wasn't until I realized, oh, I've got to fucking feel these feelings, actually feel them in my body, and work through the discomfort of them. Otherwise, they're going to stay in my body. And so when you feel your feelings, when you journal every single day, and if you aren't living the life that you want, you should be journaling at least twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, maybe more. I try to journal anytime something uncomfortable happens to me or a situation goes that I don't want. I write, what are all my feelings about this? Describe your mood level. That's what I write at the top of my journal every single day. And then I describe my mood level. I fucking hate this situation. Why I didn't close that deal? Whatever I'm feeling. Why is my mom making that call? My dad's, only watched Fox News. Whatever it is, you write all of that down. And you get it out of your body, because then when you talk to your mom, you don't have to express that anger to her because you've already expressed it. And what you're doing is you're giving yourself a release so that all of that carbonated energy in your body doesn't have to explode the first time somebody, pops the top on you. Yeah.
The one place I was never able to hide my feelings was in my romantic relationships with women.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. You have to make a pact with your partner that you're going to give each other space when you need it. And so when you feel those feelings coming up, babe, I really need to take a pause right now. I love you so much, but I've got some feelings I need to work through, and they're not about you, but it's something that's coming up, and I don't want to dump it on you. So then you go for a walk, or I go for a drive around the neighborhood, and I just fucking scream my head off, and I get all of that out of my body. And I'm not screaming at my girlfriend because I know my girlfriend's not the reason. I'm screaming at those demons that are hooking into me and activating all of those samskaras in me. And I'm literally screaming, "Get out of my body! Get out of my fucking body!" until I don't feel agitated anymore. And then usually what happens is I get to a point where I've been screaming so long that I just start laughing hysterically. And that's how I know that I've moved through it.
Okay. In my experience, well, I've taken clients like sometimes in person, just screaming in the car, like turning on loud music, or I even took a client to like basically go like axe a tree.
Oh yeah, out at my property in Weberville, I'm constantly cutting trees down. Like swing, I have a little t-ball bat that I bought and a giant trash like compost pile. And anytime something happens, I'm like, I got to get the bat out, and I just take it into the backyard and I just swing it at that compost pile to get that energy out of me. Because you're not mad at whatever the situation in front of you is. That situation is just reminding you of something that happened from ages 1 to 7 that got trapped in you. And what you're trying to do is get back to that causal emotion. Like you want to trace back. Every time you're angry, you say, okay, who am I angry at? I'm angry at a woman. Is it a romantic partner? Is it a motherly figure? Is it an authority figure? When are all the times that I've been mad at a female authority figure? And then you just swing the bat or you scream, or if you're in an apartment, you take a pillow and you scream into a pillow as loud as you can to muffle it so your neighbors don't call the cops. And you get that out of you, and you allow the release of energy to open up clarity on what the real situation is. And sometimes this will result in tears because you'll really get to the root cause of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And in my experience, that's usually my anger leads to sadness. The sadness is underneath, and the anger is like trying to protect it or something.
The anger is a masking emotion designed to prevent us from having to feel grief.
Yeah.
And if we work through the anger, we get to the level of grief, and that's where the healing can actually happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you've talked to me about like feeling your grief like before you do sales calls and things like that, and or like your sense of low worthiness and just feeling through all of that.
Yeah, well, sales is... I'm surprised that there's not more woke salesmen, because it's to be a great salesperson, you have to be totally transparent in this day and age. Like you have to really know yourself, and by knowing yourself, you're more empathetic with the customer, and you know what they need to hear. And so a big part of, like, if you have to do cold calling, or if you're having to go give a presentation at school or whatever it is, like, give yourself a beat to sit and say, describe my mood level. Like, you write that. This comes from Alan Walter's work. He ran the Accelerated Leadership and Coaching program where I'm certified as a coach at. And the first thing that we do in every single session is we say, describe your mood level. And that lets us know where is that person at? What's their case that they're working with right now? Well, my girlfriend did this, and she's such a bitch, and blah, blah, blah. Like, you let them describe what's on their mind and what they're feeling so that they can have an expression of that, because that starts to get them in tune with their body. And then you say, okay, just now describe your mood level. And what you're doing is you're opening up their awareness, because once they've vented that a little bit, they're like, well, like, it's not always her fault. Like, sometimes it's me. And then you're like, tell me about it. And so then you let them go a little more on that. And then you say, cool, now describe your mood level right now. And they're like, actually, I'm feeling a little bit more lifted. Cool, let's start the session.
Yeah. Love it. The fourth pillar is commit to what you love. So that's like the heart chakra. Yeah. And when I worked with the coach that I was working with, I think in our second session, it was just getting clear on, like, if I only chose to have in my life what I love, a woman that I love, the home that I love, the decoration in the home that I love, and the clothes that I love, and blah, 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 what would that look like? And I remember, like, I had like a physical reaction to even like receiving that in my own body. Yeah. And ever since then, it's been a very transformative process.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that you can get jacked up in your body about what you love. I used to buy a lottery ticket, and I would sit in my bed with the lottery ticket, and I would think about all the stuff that I'm going to do when I win this lottery ticket. And one time I got so jacked up, I couldn't sleep at all. The next morning, I just walked from my apartment in downtown Austin to the place where you pick up the big lottery check. And I just walked in there and I said, I think I have a winning ticket. And they said, no, you don't. And I said, oh, but I feel so good. And then I was like, oh, that's the purpose of doing the exercise. It's not to win the lottery. I may not even want to win the lottery because I don't want a bunch of people telling me that I didn't earn my money. There's some limiting beliefs there that you have to work through if you want to win a bunch of money in Vegas or something. But what felt so good was I was giving myself an excuse to think bigger and to think about what I wanted to do. And then I was like, okay, well, my actions need to align with that dream. And most people don't protect their dream, and you've got to protect your dream. If you had a daughter, or your wife or girlfriend is being attacked by a gang member or a member of ISIS or whatever the cliches of who's going to hurt you are, you're going to immediately protect that with your life. And so if your dream is to have, a Bugatti or a Lamborghini and this sick house, and to be able to provide for your family at a level that they've never even dreamed of, and to be able to fly all over the world and lift the spirits of people, like if that's your dream, you've got to protect that dream. And what happens when somebody comes to you and says, oh yeah, well, your $5,000 course, I just can't afford that. You say, okay, well, we could do it for $995. You immediately discount your dream. And so what you have to do is you have to be so confident in your dream and know that the value that you're providing to someone is so palpable that you're going above and beyond anything that you have to have a level of confidence in what you're offering and an alignment with your dream, knowing that not only is what you're offering going to get you your dream, but it's going to get them their dream as well. And when you can be that vivid and protect your dream in that way, that's when you really help people. It's why I don't do coaching with anybody for less than $5,000. One, I don't have the time because I'm doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff as well. But also because if you're not paying that much money, you're not really committed to the process. You're trying to buy an excuse to not have to change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Authentically share your truth is pillar number 5. This is one that has really transformed my life, is being able to vulnerably share what's coming up for me. And a lot of what I've done shows up mainly in my intimate and romantic life. And we talked about this on our last podcast, but ever since I allowed myself to be vulnerable and just share like what I'm experiencing, that itself has completely changed my life. And even sales calls as well. If I'm like feeling something intuitive, speaking to that, and then it really creates so much more connection and trust, and changes the whole interaction.
Yeah, well, people are afraid of their intuition because they're afraid of being wrong. They've been told that you can't be wrong and you can't make a mistake and you have to be perfect. And so all procrastination comes from wanting to be perfect and not thinking that you can live up to that expectation. So then you just don't do anything. And one of the things that I did to really fine-tune my intuition is I opened myself up to a level of vulnerability where I told everybody that I was working with that I was a psychic, and I'll draw a psychic drawing of you and I'll tell you about your energy through my drawing. I'd never done it before. I had no idea if I could do it, but I knew that the only way for me to know was to open myself up to the experience, because reality only gives you the resources you need when you step up to the plate. And so I started drawing these little stick figure drawings with all these little doodles on it. And then I'd be like, okay, look, I drew some triangles around your head, and like it feels to me like your thoughts are a little bit cloudy, and for some reason like there's this person over here that's like wielding the triangles, and like you just say it like that, and you're like, I don't know what this means. Does this mean something to you? Every single call that I did that, people would be like, oh my God, yeah, my boyfriend's been controlling me, and like I'm trying to decide if I should leave. And so again, we're just looking for the truth is a metaphor because there's no such thing as truth really in a subjective environment. Like what you're looking for is metaphors to open up transparency so that people actually tell you what the problem is. Because if you can actually solve people's problems, they'll buy your solution or they'll take your solution. Most people won't even take your solution if you give it to them for free because they don't see the value in it. And the only way to show them the value is to be transparent in what you're feeling, because reality will tell you what the problem is. If you really listen into your body and you really communicate whatever comes to mind, as ridiculous as it sounds, even if that's not the issue, it might have been the thing that needed to be communicated so that they'll actually tell you what the issue is. So you can't be afraid to be wrong. You have to be more playful in the way that you do it. And you have to be like, hey man, I know I don't know you, but what's going on in your relationship? When's the last time you got laid? Like, you have to be willing to ask that hard question, because even if that guy's getting laid 3 times a day, that might open up the conversation to what the actual problem is. Yeah, but I don't even think I love her. That's the actual problem. Now you can speak to that and you'll be given more intuition on how you can help that person move through the actual problem instead of the facade problem that they're pretending is the problem, so that they don't have to actually deal with the real problem.
Because they're afraid of feeling into that.
Yeah, and everybody puts layers upon layers of problems over the real problem. There's like 6 problems that aren't actually a problem that are just there to protect them from having to have an awareness of the actual problem.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back real quick. So why did you do those psychic drawings? That was interesting.
Yeah, well, one, I was like, I was really buying into this idea that I should be, if I want to be psychic, I should be able to be psychic. And I was like, I was doing a lot of law of attraction, what I called scripting at the time, where before a client meeting, I would literally write out the conversation the way I wanted it to go. And clients would say the exact phrases, the exact way that I had written it. And I was like, okay, this is a chicken or egg scenario. Like, did I write that and then they said that because I wrote it? Or was I intuiting that they were going to say that, and that's why I wrote it in the script? Right. I didn't know, and so I was trying to test, like, what's happening here? Am I picking up on future probabilities that already exist, or am I creating them? And so part of me starting to do these psychic drawings was, anytime you give somebody a visual, it acts as a mechanism to get past their linear brain. So I was like, okay, one, let's use some kind of artistic drawing to get into the right side of the brain so that the gatekeeper, which is that logical thinking brain, will get out of the way. And so by describing these visual images, I'd be like, I don't know, I drew this alien saucer right here. Like, are you having some alien experiences? No. And I'm like, well, is there anything that feels foreign to you? Oh yeah, actually, like, I just started this new job. Cool, let's talk about that. Like, whether I was actually picking up on whether I was actually being psychic or whether I was just using an interesting metaphor to get to what the actual problem was, all I was doing was just saying whatever came into my head. Hey, I drew these lightning bolts here. You afraid of lightning? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what's going on with electricity in your life? And they're like, oh, actually, like, my body's been buzzing a lot and I've been having this ringing in my ear. Good, that's a sign of awakening. Let's talk about it.
Oh, nice.
So it was one of those things where I was literally just drawing whatever came to me. Like, I wasn't getting a description. I think a lot of people think that in order to be psychic, there has to be vivid clarity on, like, no, actually, I'm talking to your dad right now, and your dad tells me that when you were 3, this happened. There are people that are that in tune with the spiritual realms that they can actually deliver information in that way, and I will get to that point where I can communicate in that way. But right now, like, as I'm developing the muscle of my intuition, and this is all good sales is I'm just like throwing out whatever comes to me, and I'm seeing what kind of a curveball can I throw that'll actually get this guy or girl to tell me what the real thing is.
Oh, nice. Because a lot of people don't have or they don't trust their intuition.
Yeah. Well, I would say that most people don't trust their intuition, and they're so afraid of being wrong that they're not willing to just throw out whatever comes to them,
Right.
because they think that whatever comes to them is supposed to be the solution, and what comes to you is probably not the solution, but it might be the catalyst to the solution. Mm-hmm. And so, unless you express it, you won't know.
Yep.
And the more that you do that, the more that it creates this kind of playful vibe. Because, like, if you're going into, I do a lot of business sales, and I do the same thing in business sales. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, have you guys been channeling aliens here? Like, in a business meeting.
What?
And
Really?
they'll be like, what are you talking about? And I don't know. I go, I don't know. I'm getting like an ET vibe, like you guys are out of this planet, and I'm just trying to like lighten the mood. But I say it because that's what came to me. And maybe that was the thing that needed to be said in order to bring their walls down a little bit so they could actually hear what I had to say.
Oh. Sometimes I feel things, or actually very oftentimes I feel things in my intuition, and I don't say it. It's like I feel this like like it's hard to like bring it out because it would open everyone up so much, maybe.
Yeah. Well, the truth is a sword.
Yeah.
And it cuts sharp and it cuts deep. And if you're wielding truth on a regular basis, people will hate you for it at first and love you for it long term.
Yeah.
And so most people in a social media driven world need instant gratification, and so they've tailored their whole life to be a people pleaser. And so everything is designed to get them short-term satisfaction, and long term they're losers. They're not getting anything that they want in life. Like they're not growing in any way. Their life now looks the way that it looked 5 years ago, the way it looked 10 years ago, because everything they do is for that short-term gratification. They want that dopamine hit of getting the little red number on Facebook. And if you learn to ask hard questions and to speak your truth and to be transparent, people aren't going to like you short-term, but they will like you long-term. And so you'll have a 30-year relationship with that person instead of a one-night stand.
Yeah, yeah. So pillar number 6 is follow your intuition. And an example of when I did speak my intuition was at this. I was at this workshop a few months ago, and like an authentic relating workshop. So we were basically practicing being transparent with each other and opening up. And I was in this small group of 4 men. And this one guy, pretty masculine guy, seemed really confident. He was like, yeah, just ask me anything, like literally just anything you think of. And I was like, my intuition told me to say this, and it was like, what's your relationship with your cock? And a lot came up, and a lot that can be considered negative. And then after that, I didn't see him at the workshop like in the second half. But I think that could have been.
You gave him something to reckon with.
Yeah.
That probably needed to come to the surface, and that's what truth does. It upsets people because they've been hiding from it their whole life. And it brings up the uncomfortable feelings to the surface where they actually have to deal with it. And it's so much easier to just push that down and never have to deal with it and pretend that you're this spiritual enlightened being when really you have so much garbage inside of you that prevents you from having what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to go there because it's uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, but when you get good at it, when you get really good at expressing your authentically expressing, and not in an ego way, not like, I know what's wrong with you, I know what's wrong with you, I know what's wrong with you. Like, you don't ever make people wrong because they're just a reflection of you. So if you're telling them that they're wrong, the only reason that they're in your life is because you resonate with what's wrong with them enough where there's something that you need to deal with too, especially if it's triggering you to the point where you feel like you need to be better than them.
Yeah.
That's an emotional trigger, that thing that, oh, I'm better than them or I know more than them. That's also an emotional trigger that you use to hide from the fact that you don't think you are better than them, or you don't know if you're better than them, or that you buy into the concept of better in the first place. And so one of the things for me when I first got into coaching, like 10 or 12 years ago, I was an egomaniac. I was giving people good sales advice, and I was teaching people maybe how to, be like a hustler or something, but I wasn't teaching them how to be real, and I was the whole relationship was, let me show you how much better I am than you in this session. And it was terrible. And so now I want my coaching to be more asking questions. Hey, what's going on with this circle that I just drew? You know, I want other people to talk to me because, one, I believe that everybody is mirroring back to me my own energy. So I'm going to learn something about myself by talking to whoever's in front of me. But two, I want to let people come to their own realization of what the solutions are, because when you pile things on top and you just dump a bunch of information on them, that'll give them short-term growth. That's why when you go to a Tony Robbins conference, you just fucking jacked up. You're like, yeah, I'm going to rule the world. And then 3 months later, you're like, well, I didn't do anything really. I just like had a false sense of my own ability, but I didn't actually deal with any of the underlying fears. And so my business is still where it was. And so now I'm going to have to go to another Tony Robbins conference to get that high again. And what you're actually wanting to deal with is like, where's my ego at? Where are my fears at? What in reality is triggering me? What am I hiding from? Where are the things that I'm afraid of? That's the direction that I should go.
Mm-hmm. One of my latest edges, you could say, is, I want, I feel a drive to like help men, especially like powerful men who probably, you know, maybe they're like a CEO or something and they always have to have it together and, you know, take control and things like that, to learn how to get into touch with that like deeply kind of intuitive, vulnerable self-expression. And it's really edgy because there's so much resistance there, I think, for guys especially.
Yeah, well, they just haven't seen it work. They've gone through all the executive level training that says that you have to put up this very masculine business front. You've got to wear the suit and the tie and the cufflinks, and you have to look a certain way. Like, all of those things are fine and good, but it's not going to work anymore in the new paradigm. Like, we've got the biggest transfer of wealth that's going to happen ever when all the baby boomers start to die and all that money goes into millennial hands. All of a sudden, the whole way that reality is set up is going to shift, and none of those old strategies of like hiding behind a facade and pretending something that you're not are going to work anymore. And so if you want to be on the leading edge and ahead of the curve, what you have to do is learn how to playfully be transparent. And once executives realize, oh, when I'm playful about my own shortcomings, that actually opens more doors than if I was pretending like I had it all together. Once you have that experience, you're like, well, I'm going to tell everything that's wrong with me. Because it opens so many doors, because people are like, oh, thank God, he's kind of like me.
Yeah, because more often than not, everyone else is feeling that same thing to some degree.
Right. And you can't rule through fear and intimidation anymore. It's just not going to work in the new paradigm. And you see that right now there's this massive shift towards, you know, the you economy. You're driving the ship. Like, there's no governing board. The government doesn't really matter anymore, even though people make it seem like it does. Like, nothing matters other than how you show up in reality. If you think that anything is oppressing you, you're still stuck in the old paradigm, because nothing is oppressing you personally, because reality is subjective in nature for the most part, except for a few objective truths. And so in that subjective level, you get to be the boss. You get to be the empowered spiritual master whenever you want. Like right now, it does. You don't have to work your way towards that. You just have to decide that that's going to be what you're going to be. And the first step of that is being so comfortable with your own transparency, which is what gets referred to as vulnerability a lot. When you learn how to comfortably be vulnerable and recognize vulnerability as an asset instead of as a weakness, that's when the world opens up to you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, the seventh pillar is trust your spiritual nature. So this one's a little harder to explain, but you know, in my journey, I've learned more and more, following my intuition and trusting my vulnerability, that I really am like supported at all times. And there is kind of this greater, you know, interconnectedness between all of us, you know, between all living beings, where like we're always supported, and you know, meditational practices to connect to, you could say, other dimensions and getting ideas and creative downloads is what I call them, and intuitions that are just so on point that it's like that didn't necessarily come from my mind. That just like came from somewhere. I don't even know where.
Yeah. Well, I call it my spiritual entourage. And again, these are all metaphors. Like unless you're having a vivid experience of the spiritual realms, you don't really know if they exist. You're just using them as a metaphor to live your life, a guiding structure. And so, there's a bunch of people that are like, I don't know if angels exist. I don't know if aliens exist. I don't know if spiritual masters exist. Who cares? It's an interesting metaphor to use to learn about yourself. It's like any tool that you would use. Like, you don't have to necessarily believe that the tool is the savior of the planet. If the tool can offer you something in that moment, you use the tool. And I really like Tom Campbell's approach to reality. He has a big toe theory of everything. That's basically that reality is this virtual simulation that exists in a consciousness computer, and not in like the computer that we would think, but in like an information system that is consciousness, and that at any given time we have access to the larger consciousness system, but we are individuated units of that. So this is a more technical approach to what all the Eastern traditions have taught, for thousands of years. And so the concept is reality is going to render itself like a video game. It's going to show up for you with the metaphors that are going to make sense to you. So if you were raised as a Christian, everything's going to be about how can I be a bigger Jesus freak? Like, what would Jesus do? That's the metaphor that you're going to use to get spiritual messages from the larger consciousness system. And the larger consciousness system is just like the most perfect actor ever. It's going to show up and render itself in whatever form you need to get the information. So if you're having this vivid experience with your chakra systems and the entities that are attached to each chakra, or the fairies out in the garden, reality doesn't care. It's going to say, yeah, let's teach this person how to be a good person through that metaphor. And so then reality renders itself, because it's virtual, because nothing's real, as a bunch of fairies giving you information. But if you look at the narrative thread through all the information, it's basically the same. Be vulnerable, be transparent, know who you are, go for your desires, dream big, work through your fears. Your emotional trauma isn't good for you. Like every spiritual message out there, that's the underlying message. And so these are all just metaphors that we use to describe something that's indescribable, so that we can have a tangible way and process of having a transformative experience.
Mm-hmm. So in this transition that we're going through, you talked about the millennials, the transfer of wealth from the last generation to the millennials. It's probably going to be a certain amount of chaos.
Good.
What, I guess, what advice do you have, or what, how can we handle this massive transition in the next, maybe 2 decades?
Yeah, well, one, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because reality is a mirror, so you're going to get whatever you need to get. You're going to show up in the middle of that tornado in the exact place that you need to be in order to work through your own metaphysical garbage. So don't worry about where you're going to be, because it's like going to look in the mirror. Like you can put a bunch of makeup on and make yourself think that you look better than you look, but the mirror is really going to show you, yeah, we see those cracks in that makeup. You don't look that good. So reality is going to put you where reality is going to put you regardless. And so this idea that you have to like properly position yourself physically, I think, is a false premise. Now, what you can do to show up in a better, more comfortable place of the tornado is do the emotional work now, and become somebody who understands why transparency is important, and who understands how to burn through all of those samskaras, who understands why running towards your fears is more valuable than insulating yourself from reality. Because when you do those things, what you're doing is the internal work, and when that internal garbage isn't inside your body anymore, reality doesn't have to mirror it back. That's why anybody in every single economic downturn in the history of mankind, there have always been people who got destroyed and people who just thrived more than anything. There is so much opportunity to thrive in chaos. That's where all the real opportunities are. And so if you're doing the emotional work and you're burning through your samskaras and you're confident in your ability to be transparent and to express yourself authentically, you will set yourself up to thrive in the coming chaos. But you can't be in resistance to it, because the second that you're in resistance to it, it becomes a part of your vibration. So all these protests, all these people that are like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, hate this guy, we've got to take a stand. You know, that is one way long-term to make change, but it's a really hard way to do it. It's so much easier to just let that flow through you and be in non-resistance and be like, what is this showing me about myself? If you hate the bad man in the White House, what is he showing you about yourself? What is he showing you about your ego? What is he showing you about the tendencies that you have in your interactions with others? What fear is he highlighting for you that you've been avoiding? Because that's why those people are there, to show you what you've been avoiding.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here, John Ray. So your website is whoisjohnray.com?
Whoisjohnray.com, WHOISJONRAY.com. I've got podcasts on there, blogs, art, poems. You can get me on Facebook. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Let's talk.
Let's do it.
Cool. Thanks for having
man.
me, brother.